7 days till Christmas, and work has just begun to fill up Santa's magic sleigh with toys for everyone. Although the load is getting heavier as they add sacks of toys, so he'll need 1, 2 reindeer to pull the sleigh to all the girls and boys.
Hi, my name is Sergeant Janie, and welcome to the Jamaica Defense Force 7 days till Christmas. It's quite easy. All you have to do is watch and answer the questions at the end of the videos to win amazing prizes. Today's video will look at Columbus and the Tainos.
You've probably heard of Christopher Columbus or had a day off of school to celebrate Columbus Day. There's a lot of information out there about Columbus, but not all of it is true. Before we dive into our video lesson today, let's see what you've heard before by playing a game of true and false. I'll say a statement, and you decide whether it's true or false. Don't worry if you're not sure, this is not a quiz. It's just to see what you already know. Let's start with one you've probably heard in a rhyme. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. True or false? That one's true. Columbus sailed across the Atlantic from Spain to the Caribbean in 1492. Let's try another one. Columbus believed the earth was flat. That one's false. Columbus knew the earth was round. He just thought it was much tinier than it really is. Okay, let's do another one. Columbus was the first European to set foot on the Americas. That one's also false. We've got really good evidence that Norse sailors explored Canada centuries before Columbus sailed the seas. All right, let's do one last true-false statement. When he arrived in the Americas, Columbus thought he was in Asia. That's actually true. Columbus sailed across the Atlantic, arrived in the Caribbean, and began to call the people there Indians because he believed he had made it to Asia. Even though you've heard of Columbus before, you may not have heard a whole lot about the people that he called Indians. When we study history, it's important to think about lots of different perspectives. That's why in this video lesson, we're going to think about Columbus's point of view when he was exploring the Americas, but we're also going to think about the people who lived there when he arrived. They were called the Tainos. Let's dive in and learn more about them. Tainos are a group of people who are indigenous to the Caribbean islands. Indigenous means they were the first people to live there. Tainos lived in mostly peaceful chiefdoms, ruled by chiefs known as caciques. Their villages were organized around a central plaza where celebrations and other public rituals could take place. They enjoyed singing and dancing at these celebrations and decorating their bodies with jewelry and paint. Outside of the central plaza stood their houses, which were made of straw and palm leaves woven together. The adults worked hard to get food for their families because it was important to them to raise strong and healthy children. The women did most of the farming, and the men did more of the hunting for small animals and fishing. The Tainos believed in multiple gods who controlled nature and in spirits called zemis, which might have represented their ancestors. They also played a ceremonial ball game called bate, which was connected to their religion. Some historians also believe that it was a peaceful way of resolving conflict. Instead of fighting, they played the ball game to determine a winner. They played on a field like this one. What do the zemis and the bate have in common? Both were connected to the Taino religion, which is important to everyday life in the Taino culture. One way we can understand what was important to people in the past is by looking at records they've left behind. Tainos used an early form of writing called petroglyphs, which they carved into rocks. If they took the time to create a symbol to represent something, that probably means it was very important to them. Can you look at these symbols and find one you think represents something important to the Taino culture? You may have focused on the sun, which was important to them for growing food, or on symbols that looked like babies or children, because those were important too. Or maybe you focused on the symbols that looked like zemis. All of those are great answers. While the Taino people were raising children, worshiping their gods, and farming, across the Atlantic Ocean, a man was preparing to set sail. His name was Christopher Columbus, and we're going to think about his perspective next. He was an explorer who wanted to find a new route to Asia over the sea. He knew that if he could find a fast way to get to Asia, he could get rich by bringing the spices there back to Europe to sell. He also wanted to spread his religion, Christianity. Although Columbus knew the world was round, he thought it would only be about 3,000 miles if he sailed east from Europe to Asia. What was the problem with his plan? It's actually about 12,000 miles, and the Americas are in the middle. Columbus searched for years for someone wealthy enough to pay for his exploration. Finally, he persuaded the King and Queen of Spain, Ferdinand and Isabella, to finance his voyage. They agreed to name him governor of whatever land he found and let him keep 10% of the riches there. They wanted him to claim land in the name of Spain and make the people he found there serve the Spanish Empire. Columbus sailed with a crew of 90 men on 3 ships, the Niña, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. After about 2 months of sailing, they reached land. Do you remember where Columbus thought he landed? From Columbus's point of view, things had gone well. He had gotten the money he needed to sail across the Atlantic. He reached what he thought was Asia. Based on what you know about why Columbus sailed, what 2 things do you think he did once he arrived? Once he arrived, he began hunting for gold and other riches and spreading his religion. Things were different from the point of view of the Taino people, who didn't know that Columbus was there to find wealth and to try to change their religious beliefs. When Columbus and his men arrived in the Bahamas on October 12, 1492, the Tainos welcomed them. Columbus reported to Ferdinand and Isabella that the Taino people were gentle and welcoming, but he did not think of them as equals. He thought their gentleness would make them easy to enslave. This image shows us how he thought of himself, as a person the Tainos should bow down to. An enslaved person is someone who is legally owned by another person. They have no rights and no freedom. Columbus was disappointed not to find the spices and the gold he wanted to find in this new land. He returned to the Caribbean 3 more times, each time looking for ways to gain wealth. He claimed the lands there as part of the Spanish Empire and left men to settle there. He also demanded that the Taino people pay him tribute in gold or in cotton. If they refused, he and his men violently attacked the Tainos. How do you think the Taino people felt about the Spanish when they first arrived? How do you think those feelings changed over time? Although the Taino were welcoming when the Spanish first landed, over time they learned to fear the Spanish and began to rebel against them. But they were not successful. They had no swords, no guns, and they had been weakened by diseases the Europeans brought with them. By 1550, only a tiny percentage of the Taino people were still alive. On the island of Hispaniola, where the Spanish settlement was concentrated, only around 200 Taino people survived out of 250,000 who had lived there before Columbus's arrival. Why did so few of the Tainos survive? Very few Tainos survived because so many died of disease or were killed by the Spanish. Now that you've learned about the Taino people and about Christopher Columbus, it's time to show what you know. How did the arrival of Christopher Columbus change life for the Taino people? Before Columbus arrived in the Americas, the Taino people lived mostly peaceful lives, focused on raising their children, gathering food, and practicing their religion. Columbus arrived in their land with the goal of gaining riches and spreading his religion. After his arrival, the Taino people were enslaved, and many died from disease. Every October in America, we have a day set aside for honoring the bravery it took for Columbus to sail across the Atlantic over 500 years ago. But some people have a different point of view. They think we should celebrate indigenous peoples on that day instead, like the Taino. Now that you've learned about both perspectives, give it some thought. What do you think we should do on that holiday? Thanks for learning with us today and for taking another step toward putting together the pieces of the past.
3 days left
Question number 1. What did Columbus call the Tainos when he first saw them? Question number 2. What is the name of the chief that rules the Taino village? Question number 3. What was the name of the ball game played by the Tainos? Question number 4. What is the name of the 3 ships that Columbus sailed in?
One day left till Christmas and work is nearly done. Filling Santa's magic sleigh with toys for everyone. Although the load is getting heavier as they add sacks of toys, so he'll need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 reindeer to pull the sleigh to all the girls and boys.